Hello and welcome to today's webinar. This is one of Wild Apricot's monthly expert webinars, and today we're honored to have Tobi Johnson on with us. And Tobi is a leading expert on volunteerism, and she's here to share how you can attract and sustain volunteer involvement in today's rapidly evolving digital world. And we'll bring Tobi on shortly. In the meantime, let me introduce myself. Okay, there you go. My name is Donald Cowper, and I'm on the Wild Apricot content team. That's my face there on the left of your screen, and beside me on the right of your screen, and he's sitting beside me actually, is Rano, and he'll be on chat to help with any technical issues you might have. And during the webinar, feel free to ask any questions to us or to Tobi, and to do that, you can use the chat box. And I want to make a couple of quick reminders before moving on. One is to let you know that we are recording the session, and we'll be sending you an email with a link to the recording within the next couple of days, so please watch out for that. Also want to let you know that by attending, you're eligible to earn 1 CAE credit for this webinar. And we'll get going in just another couple of minutes, but I want to briefly say that today's webinar is being brought to you by Wild Apricot. And I know that many of our customers are on with us today, so hello and welcome back. I also know that we have many people here who aren't familiar with Wild Apricot, new to the sort of Wild Apricot family, and I want to welcome you as well. And for those of you who don't know, let me briefly say that Wild Apricot is membership management software. It's actually an all-in-one solution for anyone running a membership organization, and that's because you can manage your member and contact database. You can run your events, build your website, process all your payments, and so on. And many of our customers consider it a lifesaver because it saves them hours a day in administrative tasks, freeing them up to focus on fulfilling their organization's mission. And we're quite thrilled with what many of our clients have been able to accomplish. We've watched them grow since we started 12 years ago, or many of them have been with us for that long, and they've watched us grow too. And thanks to our customers, we've been ranked, as you can see there on your screen, as the #1 rated membership management software solution on the market for the last 5 years. And while we're all very proud of that and how we can help people with great software here at Wild Apricot, we are also a leading provider of free educational content, which you can find on our blog and in webinars like we have today. I want to say that if any of you have any questions about Wild Apricot specifically, we're happy to answer them, but we'll do that at the end of the webinar. So you're all free to stick around with us after the hour if you have the time and if you have any questions. So now let me introduce Tobi Johnson. If you haven't already heard of Tobi Johnson, she is an internationally recognized trainer. She's an author and speaker and an expert in volunteer engagement. She is the president and founder of Volunteer Pro, which is an online learning and networking community for leaders of volunteers. And my colleague Rano is going to paste the link in to Volunteer Pro in the chat, so you can have that link and check that out. Tobi is also the founder of Tobi Johnson and Associates. That's a consultancy that helps organizations build capacity and strengthen their volunteer strategy. I'll also have Rano paste that link in there as well, so you encourage you to check out Tobi's links. And lastly, I do want to mention that Tobi recently published the 2018 Volunteer Management Progress Report, and you can download that for free on Tobi's site. Rana will also paste that link in there. So a lot of links for you to check out. Tobi can fill you in a bit more on the report, but I do want to bring her on right now live. So Tobi, there is the report there. Rana, I think, has put the link in. And Tobi, I want to welcome you. I want to say how much I appreciate all that you've done in preparation for today and for being here this afternoon. And I'll let you take over the presentation and the control of the presentation. Thanks so much, Tobi.
Okay, thanks, Donald. Let me get switched over. Let's see here. Huh, oh, here it is. I got popped down to the, all right, how am I looking, Donald? Look good?
Everything looked good on our side, and I can hear you. I can see the slides, and I'm sure our audience can as well. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So we're here to talk about tech trends. And I'm going to start by saying I am not a tech guru. But I started an internet-based business as part of a digital arm of my business about 2 or 3 years ago when I started Volunteer Pro. So I had to basically teach myself everything I needed to know to make that business run. And so over the years, I've really been watching technology just to see for my own business about what's happening, but also just watching the way our society has changed because of tech. If you think about it, 15 years ago, nobody really even had a smartphone. And things are changing so rapidly. And I think it's having a huge impact on how we are interfacing with our volunteers, our members, people that are activists in the community, all kinds of people that are giving of their time to make the world a better place. And I think it's changing our expectations as consumers. And so I want to take that lens and look at perhaps ways we need to adjust our strategies, and maybe old school approaches just don't work anymore. And I'll give you some reasons why I think that might be. Donald's done a great job introducing me, so I don't feel like I have to introduce myself anymore. I am the author of the Volunteer Management Progress Report. We're in our 3rd year of this report, so we have 3 years of data. We had about 1,200 folks around the world from 12 countries take the survey, and we plan to do it every year. So if you download the report, it puts you on the list to invite you for the next coming year. So there's lots of data. The thing is 45 pages long, so it's huge. But it has, information on salaries and biggest challenges. And this year we tried to do some things around benchmarking around volunteer retention, whether it be short-term episodic volunteering, project-based volunteering, event volunteering, or more traditional volunteering. And so we're trying to get data out for all of those folks who are leading volunteers, whether or not, what kind of budget they have, how many volunteers do they run, and so people can use this to make decisions in their organizations. I also wrote Chapter 1 of Volunteer Engagement 2.0, and some of the things I'm talking about, this was the first time I really started to think about these trends that we're seeing in our society. And this is the first time I really wrote about some of these things. So if you read my chapter, this was a couple years ago, that was when I really started to think through, what is happening in the world and how is it impacting our work in nonprofits and associations. So today I'm going to talk about how technology is impacting the public's expectations. I'm going to talk about 4 key tech trends, and I'm going to talk about low-cost, simple tips. And in each trend, I'm going to give you 3 simple things you can do tactically, and 1 big thing you can do that perhaps you have a little extra budget, or perhaps you have an angel investor who can help out. So I know these are high-level things we're going to talk about, but I really want to give you some practical takeaways as well. So we're going to do both of those things today. Also, on my last slide, I have my contact information. If you need CVA, Certified in Volunteer Administration credit, if you're a person who has that credential, just shoot me an email, let me know you were on this webinar, and I will send you some documentation so you can use that for your CVA. I know the CAE folks are going to get those from Wild Apricot. So awesome. So today we're going to do some big hat thinking. We're going to really take a moment out of our busy days. This is about 50 minutes of content, and we rarely have the time to do this in our busy lives in nonprofits and associations. So we're going to do that today, and I'm hoping I can really inspire you to think in some new ways and challenge yourself to think about things a little bit differently. We're going to do big hat versus little hat. Little hat thinking is more just basic program level day to day, although I will be sharing a lot of practical takeaways. But it's really about big hat thinking today. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I don't get to present on it very often, so I'm really excited Donald was up to hear about this type of content. So let's set the context a little bit. Here's what we know about the U.S. volunteer rate. these types of rates, I know this is the same in Australia. It's fairly flat. I was trying to find data on Canada that was up to date, up to, and I know in Canada rates are falling a little bit too. So no matter where you are, and maybe in your country, and I know there's folks from, I saw somebody logging in from Brazil. So we have an international crew here. So you have to really look in your country for your rates. But in the US, anyway, where I live, the volunteer rate has gone from, it was up as high as 28% of people in the US volunteering, and it's down in 2015 to 24.9. And we don't have data for 2016 and 2017 because no one's, usually Corporation for National Community Service funds that research with this Census Bureau, and they have not been able to do that for the last couple of years. So we don't even know what our actual rates are right now, but we know that there's been a trend that it has been falling. And this despite the fact that we have had a rapid increase in nonprofits. Nonprofits have really started to grow quite a bit. In 2003, it was at 1.38 million nonprofits, and now we're over 1.5 million, almost 1.6 million nonprofits in the US. So the opportunity to volunteer, and these are nonprofits, associations, any type of organization that utilizes volunteers. Faith-based, you would add on to that. That's not even including churches and congregations. So we're talking about opportunity for people to get involved, all of these institutions and organizations for people to get involved, and yet the rate is falling. And so that's really interesting. Now, we also see that there's some interest in the nonprofit space. People will not, this is the Google Ngram, you can figure out how many books have this particular word in them. And you can see this massive interest since the 1930s of just increasing interest in the world of nonprofit. Publishers will not publish books if it's not going to sell. So this is obviously a selling topic. And you can see volunteering has been on this increase over the years. And philanthropy dipped for a while, and now it's on the rise as well. And community service is sort of flat. It's sort of going down a little bit. Volunteerism is a little bit smaller down below, but you can see that there's there's an interest here. It's not that people aren't interested in volunteering or that there isn't an interest in the community around this topic. We also know that there's an incredible need for volunteers. In last year's Volunteer Management Progress Report, we asked people, what do you predict your need for volunteers for the next 12 months? So for the year of 2018, 71% of the folks who filled out our survey, and it was over 1,100 people around the world who lead volunteers, expected their need to increase. So it's not good news if the rate of volunteerism is flat or going down and the number of volunteers or the competition for those volunteers is going up. That's not good news for us. We also know that we have some crisis of trust. The Edelman Trust Barometer. Edelman is it's a global insight and analytics consultancy and PR firm, and they do a trust barometer survey every year, and I follow it. It's just fascinating stuff. So if you go to edelman.com, you can find it. But it's fascinating to see where trust is happening, what's going on with trust in the world. And in Canada, you're actually going up. Trust is going up a little bit in terms of your ranking of trust, but look at the US. It's gone way down in our ranking from 2017 to 2018. So just trust in institutions in general. Now, they also break it down by trust in types of institutions and types of organizations. And if you look at it, if you look, things were going up for a while in 26 and 27, but things are actually going back down now. And trust is falling. And particularly of interest to us are NGOs or nonprofits, where trust is now in the world in the distruster. If you see the key at the top right, 1 to 49, NGOs are now distrusted. And with the GDP5, the US, China, Japan, Germany, and the UK, trust fell below 50% last year. And that was the first time ever in the the history of the Edelman Trust Barometer. So we can't even take community trust for granted. It used to be, well, people trusted nonprofits because we were in it for the good of all people. But look at this, less than half of the people trust us. And there have been very large issues around and scandals around nonprofits. Check out Oxfam, this week happened. So we've got issues with trust. So Richard Edelman, the head of Edelman Trust Barometer, says the trust collapse has moved beyond a simple class versus mass problem to a systemic threat. So more than 3/4 of respondents agree that the system is biased against regular people and favors the rich and powerful. So there's something going on here, isn't there? So we see the women's marches. We see a movement of people rising up against what they think is an unfair system. We see people, last year, right after our inauguration in the U.S., our presidential inauguration, Volunteer Match, which is a volunteer recruitment website that matches organizations and volunteers, their traffic hit an all-time high post-inauguration. So people are interested still in getting involved in volunteering. And we've seen an increase in pro bono as well, particularly with law firms getting involved. So traditional volunteer rates appear to be dropping, but we are experiencing right here and now an unprecedented level of citizen engagement around the world. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it's important to recognize that these types of movements will happen with your organization or without them. In Knoxville, Tennessee, we had a women's march last year. We had about 3,000 people. This year we had over 10,000 people. And we're a pretty small city in a pretty conservative state in the South, in Tennessee. And so we have people that are organizing things. The person that organized the women's march for Tennessee, the folks who traveled to Washington, D.C. last year, she had never organized a thing in her life. And she said, I'm just doing this because I want to. And so people are stepping up to the plate, but are they engaging with our organizations? Are they engaging with our organizations? Are they creating new alignments without our organizations? And it's a risk to us if we're not working with them, because we have infrastructure, information, connection to community, and so do they. And when we work together with our communities and we work together with people who are very engaged, we can do great things. So what if, despite these challenges of trust, volunteering could help people cope, heal, strengthen in times of uncertainty, and move us towards a better future? What if volunteering was the thing that pulled us all together? And what if technology could be used to connect people more effectively with the causes they care about? What if? And so I'm going to talk about how that might happen and what the trends are. So now I'm going to talk about my 4 trends. So one big trend, and you've probably been feeling this, the migration from desktop to mobile. We have an on-demand world. We live in an on-demand world. About 3/4 of us own a smartphone. Nearly 3/4 of all smartphone users keep them within 5 feet at all times. And 40% look at their phones within 5 minutes of waking up. 90% within 1 hour. These are extensions, important extensions of ourselves. Some people, and we also are finding that mobile use is actually overtaking, desktop and laptop use. If you can see that, in 2014, we moved to having more mobile use, screen time in front of phones and tablets, than we do in front of desktop and laptop. So we are also on the move. So we're not only connected to our smartphones, we actually prefer them as our main place to get information. It's where we spend our time in front of screens. Now, this was in the US. It may be a little bit different in other countries, but I still think it's pretty fascinating. In terms of devices that are popular, mobile phones are up 25% last year, year on year. So they are tablets aren't really growing that much, but mobile phones are growing. So it's really interesting to think about. Amber Case, if you see her TED Talk, she talks about that human beings are becoming cyborgs. that these tools have become an extension of our physical self. They're also an extension of our mental self. Really, really fascinating discussion about that. And then we also have to maintain this digital second self, this maintained second self online. So we can edit and retouch our digital selves and present them to the world. It's very fascinating how people are maintaining their quote unquote real self and their quote unquote online personality. And then it's only a matter of time before devices can sense our feelings. And that actually has already taken place. We're seeing in hospice and elder care situations where they're using robots to offer care. And people are feeling connected to these robots because the robots are able to feel their emotions or sense their emotions by looking at facial expression and being able to offer care. It's pretty crazy. So we're all cyborgs. So what does that mean for if this kind of attraction and connection with mobile devices and smartphones, little baby computers we're carrying around? What can we do as nonprofits and associations to tap into this preference of consumers? And I think we really do have to think about consumer preferences. We can certainly try to continue to go along our way as nonprofits and fight against the tide of trends, but I think we do better if we work alongside of trends. So what are the things that we can do? Here's some simple things you can do that don't cost a lot of money, but are still doable. So one thing is increase your usability. So when you're thinking about creating content for your audience, you want to make sure you're making micro content that can fit on a phone. One column in your newsletter so people can scroll quickly through. Big buttons, video. People prefer more often to watch videos than they do to read blog posts nowadays. So really moving into video is a big deal. And we're finding, they're building the 5G network now. We think it'll be out by 2019. 5G will be roughly 100 times faster than 4G. And they are thinking that people will be able to download a movie within 5 seconds. And this development is happening right now. And so any type of glitches we're having with technology now, those are going to start to get smoothed out, and we're going to start to be able to stream video much faster than we can now. And so more and more people are going to look for dynamic content from us. So these videos, when you're doing videos, they don't have to be super sophisticated. They can be short. They can just be real. Even using Facebook Live is a way you can be real with your audience. So that's one thing you can do to tap into this connection we have with our mobile devices. The second thing is making sure people have easy access to on-demand content. So YouTube channels. So Wild Apricot's going to be sharing my video today on their YouTube channel. So they have a YouTube channel with instructional content and educational content. So thinking about ways you can use existing media to deliver either it's training for volunteers, it's information for your audience, it's member recruitment, just general information, donor cultivation. There's tons of ways to use video to reach out, but you really have to have people be able to go to an on-demand portal and be able to find those things and search for those things. And then finally, sending shorter, more frequent e-newsletters. I know some of you may do, and I'm actually volunteer for an organization, and we are seriously reconsidering whether or not we're going to continue to do a monthly newsletter, because that newsletter takes forever to gather all the information. We are volunteers. We create the newsletter ourselves. The newsletter is created as a PDF and gets emailed out. It's very static, and it's not up to date. The news that we're sharing is not up to date, and so we're considering at least doing it twice a month. And so really thinking about all of our communications, just because you've done it that way forever, how can you shorten, and maybe you're not even transmitting this any more content, you're just breaking it up into smaller chunks. So those are really simple things to do to really tap into a mobile oriented audience. There's one big thing you can do. The big thing you can do is build a mobile app for your volunteers. People prefer more than ever the convenience of going to a one-stop shop. And the good news is actually Wild Apricot has an app, so that's fantastic. So you may not even have to build one. You may be able to find one that you can use and integrate into your communications and your volunteer management. So you can use push notifications as reminders in your mobile app. So sometimes in your smartphone, you'll see things come up about the news or LinkedIn, someone's following you, someone liked your post, liked your post on Facebook. You can also set up push notifications to remind your volunteers that come up on your smartphone. You can help use geolocation to help volunteers choose different sites where they want to volunteer. So you can use mapping software in your app. You can use a community forum. At Volunteer Pro, we have a forum for our members, and that's how we stay in touch and communicate with one another. Our members have fantastic conversations, asking each other for advice, sharing good ideas, just getting clarification on some of my training. I mean, we just have a pretty robust conversation going at all times. And so you can use that within a mobile app to actually be able to create a centralized experience. And people are more and more wanting a central place to go. There's deep preference for that. In terms of organizations that are doing really well with this kind of thing, if you look into Crisis Text Line, they've only been open since 2013. And they have crisis counselors that operate via text and help people in crisis in every time zone. So they do all of their volunteer recruitment, training, community. They have an online community for their volunteers. All the coaching takes place online. They do local meetups in face-to-face, but most of their community is done online. And so they've created a portal, and volunteers are having a good time delivering service to people in need and also connecting with one another and providing each other service and support. So it's working for some of us who have decided to take this leap, and they're really keeping it pretty simple. If you go to Crisis Text Line's webpage, you'll see it's very streamlined. It's not a lot of extra information. They're keeping it simple because people can access it and read it easily on a phone. So let's talk about trend number 2, ever-increasing automation and personalization. And you've probably seen this. So personal power. We're finding, if you remember, I don't know how old you are, but when I was young, even in college, that's giving away my age, we had a Princess phone in our, it wasn't pink though, but we had it in our hallway with my roommates, and the cord was about 20 feet long, and you had to, unwind it and walk it down the hall into your room to have privacy to talk. And then we got the smartphone about, I would say about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we had our first smartphone. And then we got Siri, and we got voice automation, so we can ask our devices things and to do things for us. And we have devices that will give us information back about feedback about our bodies and what's going on with our bodies. So we're actually getting more powerful with technology just in terms of what we know about our own bodies and connecting with one another and having a more tailored experience. So evolutions in technology are changing consumer and volunteer expectations because our volunteers are consumers. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? We had a limited life before. We had to wait for people to call us back. We had to take down notes. We could never get the weather. Well, you could call online and get the weather, or you could call via landline and hear all the movies that were playing down the block. But now it's so much faster, and now we have a limitless situation on our hands. So that with that limitless situation, we also, though, have what's called a connectivity paradox. So the more connected we become, the more disconnected we feel on a human level. And so we find ourselves with ambient intimacy. So at any time, we can connect with anyone online, and it feels sort of like we're friends, but we've never met them. We can also, by the same token, feel like we're alone together. We can, when we're with a group and we feel anxious, we can turn to our phones and spend time on our phones, and it's a way of cocooning ourselves. Or we can have selected attention. We can go to a meeting but only really pay attention to what interests us, and when it stops being interesting, we start looking at our phones. So all of these things are actually creating a lack of focus and introspection. And that's difficult for us in terms of connecting with volunteers and having volunteers think about the importance of their work in communities. We also know that if we're not connecting, we may be feeling excluded, and it's very, very powerful when people feel excluded in a negative way. So we have to figure out ways to make people feel included. We know from neuroscience that the more people feel excluded, the more they're going to move away from feeling like they want to be part of something. And when they feel included, they're going to be more, it's a reward, so they lean into it. And there are huge costs of this in-group, out-group. And this in-group, out-group happens online. It happens online when people are bullying each other, but it also happens online when we're just ignoring each other if we're looking at our phones. So when we have this in-group, out-group situation dynamic, it reduces our cognitive functioning. We start feeling like we have more self-defeating behavior. We're less likely to focus on long-term results, and it reduces our pro-social behavior and teamwork, which means people are less likely to volunteer and donate. So technology can create an out-group, but it can also create an in-group, and it's very, very important that your volunteers feel like they are part of an in-group with your organization. So there's some things you can do to work with technology and help create this sense of in-group, the sense of connection. One thing is, really simple thing you can do is use your merge fields in your subject lines and your salutations of your emails. So just making sure people, hey, Toby, here's our training calendar next week, or here's what we have in store for you next week. So really trying to personalize whenever we can. And because we have automation, this is about a trend of automation, that this is not that hard to do with our customer relations software, CRM software, or our email autoresponder software, or our volunteer management or member management software. This stuff is pretty easy to set up. Using email segmenting, tagging, and automation to send tailored volunteer-centric information. So really understanding your subsets of volunteers and their interests and tagging them and sending specific emails to specific subgroups of volunteers so they feel like you're speaking to them individually. And then facilitating private online insider communities, whether it's in your community, community forum, inside your software, or using something like a Facebook group. And actually, Wild Apricot has a great Facebook group that people can feel part of. So you can do even small private online insider communities just for your volunteers, where people can feel like they're part of that in-group. So these are all simple and very low cost. The email segmenting takes a little time to set up, but once it's set up, you set it and forget it, and it takes care of things. So you could do a welcome campaign, for example, for new volunteers when they join. You could orient volunteers to your organizational guidelines through an automated, what we call email drip campaign. You could send a follow-up email to people. You could set your system up to send people a happy birthday email. Just like all kinds of things like that, really simple things you can do to set up some automation. So that trend of automation is only going to continue. And now with artificial intelligence and AI technology, the technology itself is going to be able to start to sense or understand through your users' behavior online what to do next and what they need. So it's kind of interesting how that's going to roll in the next 5 to 10 years. I would say even in the next 5 years. The other thing you can do, a big thing you can do around this campaign, is to develop behavior-based email campaigns. So supporting the volunteer journey, and you can branch email series. So depending on what people click on, you can ask people, what do you want to learn more about? Okay, if you click on this link, you're going to get this thread of emails automated to you. If you click on this one, you're going to get this thread. You can even do abandoned cart campaigns. We use abandoned cart campaigns when we're selling our webinars on Volunteer Pro. We do a la carte webinars every month. And if someone clicks to buy a webinar and they don't actually follow through with the sale, our system is set up to send them a reminder email. Hey, did you forget about the webinar? We'd love to see you here. So it's just a gentle reminder that, in a distracted world, that you don't want to miss out on this opportunity. You could do that with prospective volunteers that are applying, or members who are applying to become a member with your organization or registering to become a member with your organization. You could set up that automation and just gently remind people in a behavior-based email campaign. So behavior-based just means whether or not they click or open something that will determine what the next email is that your system will automatically send them. So not super hard to do. It takes a little while to figure out how to design a campaign, but it's not rocket science at all. Okay, let's look at trend number 3. Trend number 3 is kind of interesting. In trend number 3, we're really looking at virtual reality and augmented reality. So super interesting. These are going mainstream now. It used to be, I remember in 2014, Facebook invested about $2 million in the Oculus Rift headset. And everybody was like, whoa, what's going to happen? Is this really too advanced, or is it really going to, go somewhere? Well, then Microsoft released its HoloLens, and it was working with, gaming software. But now you're seeing, we just had a movie released this week that's all about, it's a virtual reality movie. It's about, I don't even know what it's about completely, but I watched the commercials and I'm like, oh, virtual reality really has become mainstream if it's in a movie. So, and last year Forbes was saying that 30% of consumer-facing brands will expect to experiment with virtual reality. So that's kind of interesting. And Deloitte last year, total AR and VR spending was expected to soar from 9.1 billion to 160 billion by 2021, a compound annual growth of 113%. So what that means to you as nonprofits is that the cost of this type of technology is going to continue to go down and down and down. And at some point, it will be available to you, just like everything else becomes available. And we're seeing experiments in augmented reality. In this case, Lowe's Home Improvement Stores started experimenting with AR apps to help guide people through their stores and find items. So think about this as a job aid or a support for volunteers who do something that's kind of technical for you, or members that need to follow a specific process. Is there going to be a way that you can do this? And in this case, you don't even need an AR headset. You just need a smartphone. And so think about how we can start to give people just-in-time information about how to do their work. So let's talk about some simple things you can do. Maybe you don't have an AR headset or a VR headset. You don't have a video. You can't make that yet, but you can start to offer experiential ways to try out your membership, try out your volunteer opportunities. So find ways to offer mini experiences to people. So maybe it's a live behind the scenes tour. Maybe it's a, hey, come on down for, 30 minutes and see how things are run around here. Just kind of depends on what your nonprofit does. But if you think that might be a good taste for people who are interested in volunteering for you, maybe that's a way to start to develop this sort of quote unquote virtual reality that's really done live time. Another thing you might do is broadcast behind the scenes tours. You could do live or recorded where your volunteers or your members, depending on your type of nonprofit, to actually walk around and tour people. You could do it on Facebook Live and say, hey, we're going to walk around let's say you worked for an arts organization. Hey, we're going to walk around backstage as we're getting ready for this performance tonight, and then we're going to interview some of the volunteer folks who are doing the working at the front door, helping people find their seats, the ushers, etc. So there's like lots of ways to use that. And then creating audio content for Amazon Voice Service and others. So now you can actually create, Alexa, tell me about XYZ nonprofit, or Alexa, tell me about memberships. Alexa, who do I call about volunteering for? You can start to create and submit this information to these services and start to get some streaming audio out there. Now, more and more, this is starting to become, I think in the next couple of years, this is, it's still a little glitchy. When I don't really use Siri on my phone because half the time she doesn't understand me. But think about it. I'm talking about trends on the cutting edge. In a little while, this is going to be mainstream for us to do, and it's going to work really well. It's going to get ironed out, believe me, because it has huge potential for consumers and for businesses and brands. So think about how you can communicate about your organization via Alexa. It's an interesting way to think about it. And then a big thing you can do, create a virtual reality recruitment video. Now, this probably require an angel investor or a bit of money on your part, but a day in the life of a volunteer or a day in the life of a member, you could make the headset available in your agency lobby or share it at conferences, exhibit booths, etc., so people could see what it's really like on the ground. And this is not so far out. In fact, Tom's Shoes has already created, and they actually did this in 2015, so this is 3 years ago they did this. They have an AR, and you can go on YouTube and watch it. It's not the full experience because you don't have your headset, but you can go on a giving trip with Tom's Shoes. For every shoe, this is a commercial brand that sells shoes, and every time they sell a pair of shoes, part of the proceeds go to giving shoes to young people, kids, children mostly, in the developing world. And they take you on a giving trip where they go and give some shoes in Peru to a group of kids in Peru. And they take you on the tour. It's pretty interesting. So you can start to see how virtual reality can help us connect with our donors, our volunteers, our prospective members, and kind of show them our cause in action when it's where it's really happening. Especially if you have things happening off-site, this is a great way to let people know what it's all about. So let's talk about our fourth trend. This is a fun trend, our kit culture. This is something I started thinking about just in the last, I would say, 6 months or so. So this is a trend that I've really just started thinking about, but I've been watching this happen in our marketplace. And that is, people are starting to outsource their decision making. So, maybe it's because they're overwhelmed, and I wonder if there's going to be an effect on widespread compassion fatigue. If we're too fatigued to pick out our meal, or too fatigued to pick out the clothes we're going to wear, I wonder if we're going to start to become too fatigued to choose a volunteer opportunity or to choose a membership that we want to get involved in. And so there's this kit culture thing happening, and Faith Popcorn, who's a really well-known futurist, she's really identified this future tense situation where consumers are just anxiety-ridden with social, economic, political, and ethical chaos. And so they're just like overwhelmed. We have an overwhelmed populace, and I can relate to that. I feel that really a lot more this year than ever. But then she also noted this other cultural phenomenon, Save Our Society, where the country discovers a social conscience of ethics, passion, and compassion. So we have these beleaguered, tired people, but they still want to help and they want to make a difference. So how do we merge these two worlds and make this really work? How can we make it easier for overwhelmed people to act on their social conscience? How can we offer clear and compelling messages and easy inroads to those who want to help us? So how do we do that? And I think the kit culture actually has some lessons to teach us in terms of our communication as organizations. So here's some things that I would say to tap this kit culture. One thing is really organize your information to help your volunteers or your members make decisions quickly. So you may want to frame things in, if you have volunteer opportunities, frame things in terms of ability, interest, time frame. So people can quickly look at it and figure out, does it fit in my life? Is it an interest? Does it fit in the time frame that I'm available? Whether, is it a short-term project? Is it a long-term project? What days am I available to do this? So it's really it's not about dumbing down. And some people will say, well, aren't you dumbing down our volunteer opportunities? I'm like, absolutely not. What I'm saying is to be more clear and help people navigate your options through better and clearer communications. So you can create bento box offerings. So a variety of pre-packaged projects and deliverables that you need done by your organization or your membership. This could be, hey, we need committees you could be, reaching out to committees within your organization. Hey, we need some of these things done, and this is exactly what we need done. Here's the bento box, and here's the support that will help you get it done. Even modularizing your training a little bit more so people can really see here's a bit of training here, here's another bit, here's how they fit together. So it's a lot about, it's not really about necessarily changing your expectations of volunteers. It's about simplifying that communications. And that's what these kit culture type of organizations like, Blue Apron or Stitch Fix or HelloFresh, what they're doing is they're capitalizing on the fact that people are tired. People don't want to make all the decisions themselves because they're overwhelmed, but also that their communication is very, very clear about what you're getting and when you're getting it and how you're getting it. And what you do with it when you get it. So all of that is simple, is really interesting. One of our Volunteer Pro members, we were doing an online, we do monthly coaching calls with the group, and we were looking at different members' websites. And Southeastern Guide Dogs, I thought they were starting to move into this area with their drop-down menus in their website. So they really are starting to modularize the different ways to give. So rather than just saying donate today, they're really breaking it down for people to make a decision. So you can make a one-time donation, you can donate monthly, you can become part of the Cornerstone Society, you can name a puppy, you can do that kind of thing. So they're really starting to move in this direction of making it really clear the options available. Now, you can overdo it with options, and then getting involved in terms of volunteering. There's different things you can do: raise a puppy, host a breeder, volunteer, etc. So they're starting to move. I mean, I think they can do some more, and we had lots of conversations about how they could do that in our coaching call. But they're really trying to figure out ways to give people some quick wins, quick options in terms of their communication. And I think we're really, especially in addition to being on mobile, just giving people quick options, quick wins that they can get involved quickly. They know what it means. They understand. And I think it's going to make a difference. The other thing you can do is really create bento box it completely and create support toolkits for your volunteers that are hosted online. So per volunteer role, people can go into a Dropbox or go into a portal. Maybe it's your community portal, and they have very easily labeled training and reference information that they can get their they can get frequently asked questions answered quickly, so people can self-serve really well. And some people are doing this, but I think we have more to do in this area to allow our volunteers and our members to be able to get to things quickly, get the information quickly. And when people have these support kits, they really feel like, some of this thinking is done for me. And so it's really a user experience type of situation. So it's going to take some work. I mean, I'm still kind of thinking through this kit culture trend, but it's going to take some work on our part to really think about how we can deliver an experience to our volunteers that helps them become more involved with our organizations more quickly. And so I think it's still going to take a little time for us to think about these things. All of the things that I've mentioned today, all of the simple steps you can take, all of the big things you can do, all of these things, I think will help you. You don't need to do them all, obviously. Nobody has time or energy. But if you are to try some of these things, if you do, let me know. I really want to hear about what your results are. Would love to share those results with other folks, because I really think we have to start pushing through our traditional kind of same old old school volunteer engagement and member engagement and move towards what the world is today, because the world is what it is. We are not that powerful. We cannot change it. But rather than accepting things I cannot change, I am changing things I cannot accept. You can change things from within your organization, and you can improve things. And when you think about the context that you're living in, what's going on today, there's a lot. It is crazy town in the world today. So, but only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. And so I really encourage you to think about some of these trends and think about how your organization is going to pivot to align with them and be really responsive to the ways that consumers are behaving, what they expect. And in the end, once people get involved with you and they find out how fantastic you are, there's only one way you're going to go, and that's up. So it's important for us to connect. People are very, very engaged right now. They want to do something, but they're having a hard time engaging with some of our organizations. And we've got to do a better job at that interface. So most of the trends today are really about doing better at that interface between the public and our organization. So I hope this has been really helpful. I'm going to open it up for questions. Donald,
Yes.
you're gonna look at go through? I've seen there's some great comments coming in while I was speaking.
For sure.
But maybe you can pull out some questions. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in the questions box, and Donald will field some for me.
Exactly. So we got a few minutes. We'll take some questions. I'll also let you know how we can carry on the conversation afterward. Thank you, everybody, for all your comments. People loved you, have loved your webinar, Toby. And so actually one of the things, because I was thinking about it too, I'll paraphrase the question. So you covered off a lot of stuff here. Let's say somebody wanted some quick wins. They needed volunteers for a campaign or an event coming up in the next month. Like, where do you think you could get some kind of quick wins on? A lot of the stuff, might be hard to know. Is this somewhere I can get a quick win? This is obviously something that I can layer in as part of sort of a building out our volunteerism effort. So maybe there's 1, 2, or 3 things that you've covered off here that you would recommend.
Yes. If you have an event, think about the bento box idea, the kit culture idea. If you have an event coming up, can you create a landing page that really lays out really clearly, step by step, what the event's about, what people are going to get on it? Usually our events, like the web page is like 50 million, you're scrolling forever. It's all this like detail. Just, how can it be like, look, hey, here's what you're going to get. I hate to say, I don't want to say consumerize the offering, but really simplify it in a way that people can grok it right away, like get it right away. Like, okay, I understand what this is. And then I would just link to that page and post on social like crazy. That's the way I would go with an event, to do something really quickly, to get a very quick win. Is simplify. The other thing is video, having people having at least one video just talking about what the event's about, having current, if you have volunteers who've already taken a part in this event and had a good time and are okay speaker, have them do a quick video, 2 minutes or so. More mid-range for organizations that are trying to, really build towards something. I would say list building is your number one thing, and you want to start to have things that people can opt into or get people on your newsletter list, so you can start to communicate with a larger audience than your current members or current volunteers. You need to start to build that audience and that community, and you could do it through a Facebook group as well. But you need to start to have this community that's orbiting around your organization and is thinking, at some point when the call comes and you're like, we need help, folks will come to your aid right then. So those are a couple things.
Thank you. We'll take a couple more. So actually, a few people have asked about, I guess senior citizens are kind of where they get their volunteers from, and sometimes they're not so tech savvy. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, just because someone's 75 years old does not mean they don't use technology. My mother is 74. She'll be 75 in May. And she uses Facebook daily, and way more than I do. And she doesn't always use it in the way that I would like her to use it. She doesn't always, I'm like, oh, social faux pas. Why did you share that? But she is comfortable using it. So you cannot assume just because of people's age that they're resistant to tech or that they don't know how to use tech. That said, if you have people that are really not, most people now have at least a smartphone. So you can buddy people up in your community of volunteers and have people who, they don't have to be experts in tech. They just have to show them how they use their phone to get on Facebook or whatever. So, I have my dad, on the other hand, just got his first flip phone this year. So yes, there are these outliers that no way, no how. And he won't even answer the phone. I'm like, would you please pick up your flip phone? There's a reason I'm not going to bring it in my car. That's why you want to have it. You want to bring it in your car. So yes, there are outliers like that. But I think if you can get your volunteers who are more tech savvy and are a similar generation or age group of the volunteers who are having a hard time, they're going to feel less threatened, and they're going to understand because they're going to be talking in the same language. But you can find older volunteers who are in tech and using it quite well. So you can't make that assumption. By the same token, you do want to coach people along. So sometimes you have to get people in a room and show them how. So that's what I would recommend.
And I'll throw one at you, maybe a quick 30-second answer, and then
Sure.
anyway. So it actually, thank you. No, this is great. I just mean that we're going to close in on the top of the hour. So this one actually the opposite. So recruiting and retaining younger volunteers. I guess with some of the things that you talked about, where do you think people might see more results?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to get with the things that younger people, the AVAR sets. That's just, if you want to attract young volunteers, use young technology. If you're at a volunteer fair and you've got an AR set and you're showing your volunteer opportunities, they're going to think that's pretty cool. But beside, kitsch and tricks to, that kind of thing to bring people in, I would say more so with younger volunteers, and obviously you want to be on the platforms where your volunteers are, Facebook isn't really the thing for younger volunteers. It's more like Snapchat and things like that. But I also think you need to combine anything you're offering to younger volunteers with a youth adult, just look this up, youth adult partnership, just look up how to create a youth adult partnership. There's lots of research on this. So you have to have a youth-friendly organization. You also need to include and think through some youth development practices that you can include in your volunteer offering. So look up youth development as well, youth adult partnership and youth development, and think about ways to help promote young adults, emerging adults, because nowadays you're not just a child or an adult. There's this emerging adulthood as young people stay at home longer and longer. So we're seeing that adulthood is taking longer to get to in some respects. So you have to help people along that journey and create that space for them.
Thank you so very much, Tobi. On the screen now, you can see, I'll actually have Rano plug in that link again to the report just to make sure everybody can get the free copy of that. And just a few things before we wrap up. So you covered off a lot. People are already saying in the comments that there was a lot in there for them to take away. I just want to remind everybody, we are sharing the recording so you can get you can replay this, so you don't have to worry about trying to remember it all. We can share the slides as well. I'll send an email out, let's say you can look for that tomorrow. If you are new to Wild Apricot or have any questions for us, I'll cover off some free resources and offers in just a moment. But if you're already familiar with Wild Apricot and you're anxious to continue the conversation, there were a lot of questions we couldn't get to. We're always tight on time when it comes to that. I do want to encourage you to join our Facebook group. Rano's going to paste the link in for that. If you're not already a member and, Facebook is part of your world, I encourage you to join that. All our experts, many of them, like Tobi, are there. And I'm going to run out shortly and post something on Facebook and tag Tobi. So you look out for that. As I said, if you are new to Wild Apricot, before you jump over to Facebook, if that's what you want to do, I want to quickly know, where you can find more free educational content, which you can do that on our Academy. And I think Rano's going to paste the link in right now. And this is where you can find more webinars. We record all our webinars, so you can look out for past webinars. Actually, Tobi's done webinars with us before. Recommend you take a look at the resources on our blog and articles. There's lots of helpful content there about, a lot of topics where you might look for help, like volunteerism, fundraising, running events, growing your membership, etc. And all of that content is free. And lastly, I'll say that if you're running a membership organization, whether that is a nonprofit or it could be an association or club or any type of organization, I want to let you know that you are free to try our software at no cost for 30 days. Encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. Rano's going to paste a link in where you can start your free trial. And this is ways, where you can automate all of the tasks that consume your life running your organization so that you can focus on some of the strategies that Toby talked about. And there's the link I think you got now. That'll take you to our website. You can enter your name, your email, your organization name, and you're ready to go. All right. So if you would like to receive a call from one of our coaches, just type your phone number into the chat, and I'll make sure that one of our coaches gets in touch with you. And we are right at 3 o'clock at the top of the hour. So I'm going to pass this over. If anybody does have questions about Wild Apricot, and Toby did mention a couple of things related to Wild Apricot, like the new membership app that we have, or new app, mobile app for members, and Rano can talk about that. Anything else that you might think about that was inspired, say, by Toby's webinar, I'm going to pass this over to Rano, and he'll get going to take your questions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so very much, Toby. Here is Coach Rano.